All right, we're gonna do it live as I'm trying to figure out the order of shows today for Connect This. We're gonna have the core team today. We do not have a guest, although we're brainstorming lots of guests for the future. Always interested in your ideas about it.
Is that because nobody wants to be a guest, or
okay. No. There's a very long line, but it's like one of those lines you see and you're not really sure what you're in line for. So we're trying to work our way through it. I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I am going to introduce Travis first. Travis Carter from USI Fiber in Minneapolis. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, my friend. Did you have lunch today?
I did. I had a wonderful lunch of sandwich, panini, in fact, and chicken noodle soup, my favorite.
Oh, shoot. I was hoping your blood sugar was low because I got a couple things to...
Oh, well, you're in luck. I mean, I warned you last time. I was up quite early to fly home. I was in Spokane working with a bunch of different tribes for a tribal broadband boot camp. It was a wonderful week, but I have not slept a lot, and Ooh. I am... Yeah, so you can poke me today. It's going to be interesting.
There you go. All right, here we go.
We got Kim McKinley coming in from UTOPIA Fiber. She has minutes left of her assignment. And then we're just going to bring Roger on all the time. I don't know if he knows that. He's one of the people in line, it turns out.
He doesn't even know he's in line, but he's in line. So you're going to make me quit a job and then keep bringing my old boss on? Okay, fine. That's how it goes. Yeah, good to be here. And yes, this is my last day at Team Utopia. I started there in December like 2nd of 2010, and I left for a year back in the day, and now I'm leaving for a second time. Do I come back for a third time? You never know.
Yeah. No, I mean, from what I understand, you're leaving in part because things are going too well and you want to go, you're one of these women that likes to fix things, right? Men, other things.
I don't think I'm really good at the men part, but yeah, I think Utopia is in good hands. They are rocking and rolling and changing the world. I am going to go venture off into the construction world. I just actually signed my offer letter yesterday, and I'm going to be the chief of staff of TAC Communications. And so I am excited to move on to the construction world and see what kind of chaos I can create there. The open access world's already doing pretty well. Now it's moving on.
Yeah, you've crushed it. And so, now we can, if you want to come back to Utopia, we have to root for them to really start stumbling, and then you'll want to come back.
Yeah, we don't want that to happen.
All right, then we have Doug Dawson from CCG, where also he's coming back. I understand you have water that you can take out of the faucet and put in your mouth now. Is that right?
I took 2 showers yesterday, washed clothes, ran a dishwasher. I'm a human being again. So when you say we're live today, I actually am. So.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's been rough. So Asheville's doing better. That's great. And then Doug's continuing to knock him dead with the CCG blog. I was just poking Doug about Blue Sky. Maybe we'll see him on there. But my team is part of the many who have flooded into it lately. It's really picking up steam. I'm Sports Shot Chris. We are, I believe Sean has created our Community Nets account there, which will not solely be me. So I wanted to announce that in part because if anyone here is listening, please reach out. We'd love to try to get back to having great conversations, about different things, about broadband, community networks, other broadband issues. And so let's make sure we're all well connected out there. Maybe Travis will even create an account and lurk some more.
Never happened.
No, I made 2 on X. So I heard you got rid of yours, so I made a second one.
We're just not using it as much. Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see what happens. I've got some real concerns with that platform. But today we're gonna talk about a lot of other topics. We are gonna start off talking a little bit about Verizon and AT&T telling the courts that they can do whatever they want to sell user data, and the FCC can't stop them. We're gonna talk about some of the places that have handed out awards for networks. A lot of community networks from California and New York have done some interesting things, I thought. We're going to talk about Starlink a bit because interesting things are happening. It came up while I was working with these tribes that are mostly in the Pacific Northwest, but a few that were elsewhere. And they've started a customer service line. We're going to probably talk a little bit about whether we think Ajit Pai was successful as chair of the FCC, because I was listening to a podcast and they held him up as someone who was a successful part of the first Trump administration. I thought it was an interesting point that they made. The spectrum value of the millimeter wave stuff that was supposed to bring us 5G is really declining, right as AT&T's trying to scare us all into giving them more access to spectrum. And there's other stuff we're going to talk about, uploading and other stuff. So we'll get to that maybe, but I want to start off with Verizon and AT&T telling the courts that the FCC cannot punish them for selling user location. There's several different lawyerly arguments, and I don't know if we really want to get into those as much. One is just that the courts have recently held that companies need jury trials in many more circumstances if they're going to be assessed penalties. So that's a part of this, but also there's other issues at stake. And so, Doug, let me throw it to you first. Have you been tracking this at all?
I have. And in fact, I think it's awesome that if those two companies ask for a jury trial, because I can picture a class action suit where they get fined $30 billion. Pretty much any jury of anybody would go, you're selling my data. And so it's like, okay, well, then let's go that path. I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful idea. In fact, we should go that path anyhow. I don't know why there's not a class action lawsuit against them. But, so their point here is the FCC no longer has any teeth. Not that they had very much to start with. But if they can't find anybody, then anyone you regulate is free to do whatever they want anyhow. So.
Yeah, and because one of the things the FCC could do is refer it to the Department of Justice for some kind of further action, but the Department of Justice has its own priorities, and so that's it would be a significant change if the FCC is not able to find. But Doug also reminds us the sometimes thin line between jury trial and mob action, which this could result in. Kim,
I have a question. So, if the FCC can't do this and they can't do that, what could the FCC do anymore, according to these big telcos?
Well, as it happens, the new incoming chair of the FCC says he's got two priorities. I'm sort of being a little bit hyperbolic here. One is he's going to end censorship. We're going to have no more censorship. And the other is he's going to take broadcast licenses away from anyone that criticizes his boss. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
Did he really say that?
Yes.
I mean,
he did, and that's two things he really probably is unable to do. So that's
just it. In fact, so Doug and I got an email from a friend of the show who made up some hilarious dialogue that is both too funny on the nose and too expletive to share here of what perhaps Jessica Rosenworcel's comments to Carr are as she leaves the council of the commission. Travis?
So how many bets do we currently have going? Because I feel like this is an opportunity for another one.
Well, so we have a couple of bets. We don't have very many bets where we can clearly judge who's going to win. And so I've been trying to figure that out. I keep texting you that, and then that's when you go quiet because you keep wanting to do these bets that are going to be impossible to know who wins in the end.
Here, I guess, and this will have to be open for interpretation, but was the last FCC more effective than the incoming FCC that we can evaluate in 4 years?
I would prefer to see where Jessica Rosenworcel works next before I answer my honest feelings about this FCC.
Well, isn't there one of 5 choices?
We'll see.
Yeah.
But no, you're ask a very good question, Travis. And
Really?
we've
Episode
been,
102, first time ever. So
we've been pretty clear that this Federal Communications Commission has not done much. I think it's woefully underperformed, and I think time will tell more as to just how badly it does.
Now to give them credit, the Biden administration wasted 2.5 years to seat their 5th commissioner.
I mean, the Biden administration wasted like 9 months, and then Jessica Rosenworcel, who did not want to be upstaged by someone who actually cared about regulating the telecommunications company, along with a few of her friends in the Senate, wasted the rest of the time, and they decided they would rather do nothing than to allow Gigi Sohn on the commission. So
you're almost getting him on a rant already, guys. You guys are almost getting him on a rant early in this show.
Yeah. Doug wants the point for that one. Then we're going to start having points assigned for whoever can most get credit. It's like the assists in soccer. You're going to track those for rants.
Wait, soccer has assists?
yeah.
Wow.
Hockey's better because you get 2 assists. But Verizon and AT&T, let's be clear. In 2017, the Republicans came into power. They got rid of a bunch of privacy stuff. The standard Republican talking point, which I'm not saying that this is because it's wrong, but their point of view is the Federal Trade Commission should deal with this. And if we have Gigi back on, I think we could deal with that, or others that really track this. I'm not enough of a in the weeds person to know exactly what the pros and cons of that are, but that is typically what the Republicans say, is that they would rather have the Federal Trade Commission dealing with this sort of thing.
And there's a good reason for that. The Federal Trade Commission doesn't establish policy. They attack issues one company at a time, so they don't really change anything because of that. They try to shame a big company and hope the little ones follow. So that's why they prefer the FTC. So
yes,
they're actually very aggressive, but they just don't have any teeth either. So
right. So, and then it's also many years later, which
yes,
these companies are the sort of like, well, that's someone else's headache. So
right.
Future me has to deal with that. That's also my approach to meals, and so I'm familiar with how it predictably fails. Future me's problem is what I'm eating right now. It's not my problem. I wanted to jump into Starlink. Starlink has opened up. There was a period there where I was saying that Starlink had waiting lists in a bunch of spots. That news was old, but now it's right again because they went some period without having waiting lists. I think some of the coverage of Starlink lately has led to a real boost of signups. They now have more than 4 million people around the world. I think like 2 million in the United States. Does that sound right? And
That's
they have waiting lists in some areas again now. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, that certainly speaks to handing them 15 million more customers in the U.S., doesn't it? So, yes.
Right. It would be difficult for them to handle all of those areas if they were just handed to them. The other thing is I was interested because I was working with tribes that in many cases are operating wireless networks in quite remote areas, and also areas with a lot of valleys and mountains and things like that. And we're talking with them about where they have challenges, because many of them are going from wireless, sometimes with 2.5 or CBRS or 5 gigahertz. And they are trying to build fiber optic networks, in part with funds that are available from the federal government right now, hoping for BEAD dollars. And so I was just asking, like, where do people leave you for? They track that. And they said that, and many of them said that roughly half of the people that leave them for Starlink come back to them within 3 months. Because of frustration over a lack of a customer service line. They can't get any support if something goes wrong. And I just thought it was interesting. Just this morning on the plane, I saw that they're opening a customer service line. So apparently Starlink has heard that criticism. Travis, or go ahead, Kim.
I was going to just say, I've heard the same criticism. I think that some of the ILECs out there who experienced some of like losing customers to Starlink are going, if they do improve their customer service and their quality a little bit, I think that there's some of those who are really going to struggle, because they could lose those customers forever if Starlink actually gets their game in check with some of that stuff. So I think this will be an interesting to watch how this pivots the industry a bit.
Yeah, we also never want to talk about geography with satellite, and we need to, because where you went in the Northwest with all the hills, it's a terrible place for Starlink. Where I live is a terrible place. I mean, I just was working in a county in the Midwest where everybody loves them, but it's flat, it's open. They all have a good view of the sky, and interestingly, they have a local called a bulletin board. They all help each other with the technical issues. They all know who each other is, and so they've solved it themselves. And all they hate is the price, but they all love the quality. They're also getting really fast speeds. A lot of them are getting 300 megabits, so they're not at all unhappy with the speeds. But you go to where the tribes are, you're talking about, they're not going to have that kind of performance. So.
The Ookla says, and this could be out of date, but Ookla says the average speeds are in the tens of megabits, high tens, middle tens, like 60, 70 megabits a second, I believe is the average.
That's the average nationwide, yes. So
one of the other things we heard, and Travis, I really want to get your opinion on this as someone who's used Starlink and never misses an opportunity to talk about how revolutionary it is. Folks in one of the places in California that we were checking in with in Northern California, where it is really quite remote, they were talking with people where they're going to be building fiber and said, what would it take to get you off Starlink? And some of them said, never, I would never. Starlink is the best internet access imaginable. They had been on maybe DSL before a dial-up, and for them, Starlink is this wonderful thing, and they couldn't imagine a better service. And so I thought that was also interesting as in terms of a response from people that are pretty non-technical.
Until they visit somebody's house with fiber. Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Travis?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Starlink's interesting. You read all the articles and you talk to all the people and they think, yes, don't get me wrong, it's revolutionary. It's amazing how the tech works, but it's wireless. So all the same issues you have with cellular, the open access, the CBRS, and all that stuff is all very similar to the issues of Starlink, And I also want to make sure that people understand, to onboard 4 million subscribers to a brand new network, that is quite an achievement.
For what? What's the difficulty there, Travis?
The amount of backhaul, the amount of earth stations, the amount of, just everything, just the logistics of shipping 4 million terminals, getting them installed. And then you're dealing with people that have a varying spectrum of technical skills. We dispatched a person to somebody's house yesterday because when they were vacuuming, they unplugged their router and they thought the internet was down and posted all over social media.
Yeah, no, we've heard that story. It's always the vacuum too. It comes up over and over again. Also,
so,
it's just. I just heard the best story though. Sorry, I'll go ahead.
They came right back and corrected social media though, right?
No, you have to follow up on that. Yeah.
So I was talking to this group and they said that they this guy had gotten the business from like a family friend and customer who was like, your service keeps going down every night, right when my son needs to do his homework. And we are just very frustrated. And a week or two later, they found out that the kid was unplugging the port
so that he couldn't do his homework.
So he couldn't do his homework.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is amazing story. If they this is the great thing about technology. When we were a kid, they were like, just go pick up the encyclopedia and you couldn't unplug that. So I really want to be a kid these days where you can outsmart some of the technology so you don't have to do your homework.
Kudos to the kid.
Oh, yeah.
Travis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that guy's going to be a millionaire with those kind of ideas.
And Kim's probably, the longer you do customer service, the more you hear, and it'll be really interesting if Starlink does a good job with customer service, because that would really be a sticky component for them. People can handle the price in most of these places. It has to work. And
that's the next question then, Travis, which I actually really wanted to hit Kim with, because Kim, you think a lot about a lot of this stuff on policy and whatnot. And the question is, if you have a service like Instagram, which operates kind of like a Google, sorry, my brain is just caught on the comments now. If you have a service like Starlink, which I think of as operating like Google, right? Google has this like email thing, and it's great as long as you don't have a problem. If you have a problem, who are you going to call? No one, right? Like Google's not going to answer the phone and help you with it.
Yeah.
And so with Starlink, you're sort of moving, but this is an essential utility. And the challenge is that like Starlink's model is predicated on them not paying a bunch of people to do tech support in the way that Travis does. And so there's challenges around that. Go ahead.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think the problem why you're seeing a lot of people sign up for Starlink, even if they have a fiber choice right now is because people don't understand the technology. So how do you get consumers who are smarter in this space to understand what they're dealing with? I don't know if it's possible. So I always think that you're going to suffer with market penetration because of their customer service and not having a tech, like Travis just said, who can go to their house, right?
Mhm.
Because you're always going to struggle. I don't think that they're going to get as high as market penetration as some people think, because you're going to have, not to say that elderly people don't know how to work routers and such, but it's usually elderly people who struggle with that. And they're never going to be the ones who want to try to fix it themselves. They're just going to go with the option that somebody can come out to their house and fix it. I mean, I don't know if you would agree
Right.
with that, Travis, or not, but that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, no, I the people at least that we've met in rural Wisconsin, where we're doing our rural build, I mean, these people have these 40-foot dishes in their backyards getting that Viasat stuff. And when they move to fiber, they think it's the most amazing thing in the world. But you know what? Moving that to Starlink would give them the same exact feeling. It's such an upgrade for them.
Do we know the technology, Travis or Doug? I'm wondering in terms of the future. Like as we were trying to figure out max capacity of Starlink, we were sort of assuming, 10 gigabit per second satellites, a maximum of 3,000 or 4,000 homes or prem on them. It sounds like Gwen Shotwell, who actually is the person doing all the work at SpaceX, not Mr. Washington D.C. Elon, but Gwen was recently saying that they have a plan, put no timeline on it, but for 20 gigabit per second satellites with narrower beams. And I was thinking to myself, well, how many could you put on this? But Viasat could put 100,000 people on a satellite, right? So I don't understand how it works technically, but do we have a sense of what the limits are of these things?
Well, first off, Viasat satellites are like the size of an apartment building. So that's not quite the same thing. I mean, it's just packed full of everything, right? So there's a limit. These are little tiny things. I mean, these things will sit on top of your desk. This is the Starlink one. So that's going to be a limitation. The technology is changing. The new satellites don't have to be limited to what they can see below. They're starting to transmit data between themselves. So they're making a Skylink to get to the nearest base station. And that's a revolutionary change, because the places that are too busy can send their data to places that aren't as busy.
Well,
So
they can, but also that's how Travis built his
Yes.
Wi-Fi network in 2006, and we know that there are
Yeah.
limitations with that.
Well, the trouble is, and Travis said it, when you have that many customers, bottlenecks appear all sorts of unexpected places. They just do, so because there's nobody directing this. The satellites themselves are going to try to figure out the best routing, and they're not always going to figure it out, right? So it's an ongoing real-time challenge that changes all wireless. It changes every 2 minutes. It's a very complicated network. So,
Travis, we're going to wrap this up soon, but what?
No. It also, wireless technology's come a long way. So when the Gen 1 satellites launch, I mean, they're using phased array antennas, they're using beam forming, they're using all kinds of different techniques. It's almost the perfect scenario where you have the satellite overhead looking down to get optimal use of the wireless the wireless spectrums. The bigger issue is their backhauls and their downlinks, but they were really smart. They segmented the access and the downlink into 2 different frequencies. And so some of the frequencies they have are big. This is what we've always talked about. If we have access to frequency, you can make this stuff work. So I think right now, the bigger challenge, I have to imagine the bigger challenge for them is building ground stations. Because now you got to deal with all the local regulators and the conditional use permits, land rights, all the stuff that us people on the ground work with, they have to deal with now as well.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone who was talking with making the case to Starlink that they should have partnered on some project. It was a long project that would have had the opportunity to do a ton of ground stations on one of these middle mile fiber builds that they could have put station after station in with all the same regulations likely, and they blew them off. They said that we've got it covered.
They were talking to Equinix and all the big data center guys to do them on the roof. But honestly, I think it's smart the way they're doing it. If you've ever seen one of their ground stations, just like Elon did with the superchargers, controlling it, they're wildly more successful than being in a co-op. So they'll get there. It's just the irony of the whole thing is they need fiber. And in a lot of these rural areas where they're putting up the base stations, they now have to build fiber to the nearest,
maybe, I don't know, like 40% of rural America has fiber now, so not all the places, but there should be a bunch of places where they could get a pretty quick fiber handoff.
You would think, but the reality of things and the perceived reality sometimes are different.
Yeah. All right. Any last comments?
I agree with Ruben. If you tear a dish apart, it's pretty fascinating how they're built. So
let's just get this out of the way quick. Travis,
no, we need to stop. Who just tears, like, do Ruben and Travis just tear dishes apart like on their spare time?
Yeah, I think you probably saw it on YouTube. You can see it and everything there.
And then I guess you put it back together and it works.
No, I had one that broke. I took it apart to see what was in it. I don't know what Ruben did, but it's it's cool. It's really well engineered. So yes, Mr. Mitchell, you were sailing. Yeah.
Was Ajit Pai 2017 through 2020, the end of 2020 to early 2021, was he successful as a chair of the FCC? just hit me with it. I'm ready.
Ajit Pai in my lifetime was the most effective chair of the FCC, soon to be trumped by Mr. Carr. So,
as I've said before, Travis, name two others.
I'm a resultatarian, baby.
No, you're not. You're a recency bias.
You are about to drink the sweet 6 gig at your house. You can thank Mr. Pai and his FCC for that.
I believe that Travis is a fanboy, is what I think.
I like results. I like when things happen. But it does beg a question here. 26 minutes into our show. How many people is Bede hooked up?
Oh, he's just rattling them off now. Here we go.
Are we still at 0?
We're at 0, but we could spend a second on this. Louisiana is making a hard case that they will have a lot of people connected next year potentially. Doug, what do you think?
Well, it's up to the FCC or the NTIA to still relax some of the rules, because right now most of those projects have mandatory environmental studies and stuff. It's still good. If it's next year, it's still towards the end. I mean, we always expected a few awards right around now. So, but once those are over, then they start installing like crazy. I mean, a year from now, there will be stuff being installed everywhere, assuming that there's any money given out for BEAD. So,
well, it looks like Louisiana might be getting theirs before even the new Congress. So,
yes,
be curious.
And there might be another state or two. There's a few other folks getting close. So, yeah.
So Travis, enjoy. You'll still have possibly another 6, 10, 12 opportunities to ask that. So,
well, no, I'm just concerned about how many chicken wings I'm actually going to be eating here when I've won all these bets. So that's my bigger concern. So bring it on, Mr. Mitchell.
The problem is that if I win the bets, I won't be able to afford chicken wings. So I was listening to a show of politically conservative folks and some of their concerns that they have about the announced cabinet picks for Trump, and they were talking about the previous administration, and one of them said, as a person who has no understanding of telecom at all, but is a person I think is worth listening to, and he said some of the commissioners were quietly really effective during the Trump years, and he named Ajit Pai specifically for dismantling net neutrality. Although I don't think he actually knows what that means or anything, but nonetheless used him as an example of someone who he thought was quietly effective in the previous administration. It just got me to think, like, was he quietly effective?
Well, I have an opinion. I don't think either of the last two FCCs were at all effective. So they didn't really do the Ajit Pai administration didn't do very much. I mean,
Doug, are you trying to start a fight with Travis right now? Are you trying to start a fight with Travis?
I completely
hit one out of the park. He hit one out of the park.
I agree. I agree on the Wi-Fi, but he didn't do a whole lot of other stuff. I mean, of course he killed net neutrality. That's what he was put in to do, and he killed it immediately. But that wasn't.
No, but he didn't.
Mine.
So let's.
I know he didn't.
Let me jump in. He did.
He came right back.
Exactly, because he did it in such a poor manner, which I'm thankful for, that California was able to put it in, and I think Washington State, maybe New York or Vermont or someone else, but resulted in
no one. Yes, sir.
So, but because he's so screwed up the order in terms of actually being effective to prevent states, which I'm thankful for. But I would say he didn't do a very good job of shredding that.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about as the FCC gets more toothless, the states will just go back to regulating, and we're not really going to change anything except there will be 6 different regulations instead of 1. So.
Yeah, I just did an interview with Andy Schwartzman, in which I think we talked about this, unless I'm confusing it with an upcoming one with Gene Kimmel. But I think Andy Schwartzman and I talked about this a little bit, in that we're currently in a situation where if the FCC says, well, we don't think we have jurisdiction over this thing, well, then they also don't have jurisdiction to say the states cannot do it. And so it's an interesting kind of catch-22 in which almost all public interest stuff could either work at the state level or the federal level, but they can't block both off with the work that they're doing currently. Kim, did you want to jump in on this at all?
No, I didn't, Chris, but thank you for asking.
So the other thing is, I want to talk about RDOF then. And I don't know.
She doesn't want to say it. She doesn't want to say anything bad about Agent Pie. That's all.
Well, let's and that's
she liked his big mug. So, yeah.
I did like his big mug, but the thing is, like, I go back to what besides Travis's love of 6 gigahertz, what the heck has the FCC really even done? I mean like, it's a useless agency.
There's 3 things that I would say that Pi did, and I'm not thinking of anything, but I think someone else might be able to name 3 things that Jessica Rosenworcel's FCC has done that were good. But 3 things that Pi did that were really good is 6 gigahertz, obviously. First, foremost, I mean, it really could be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, of course. But then coming in after that would be the tribal priority spectrum window, which allowed hundreds of tribes to get access to 2.5 gigahertz, and many of them are using that to connect people. It's really important for the tribes. The third one would be the RDOF, which I want to talk about as terms of what an epic failure it was. It was very transparent and had a commitment to transparency we've not seen from other agencies or the Federal Communications Commission. So those are 3 things that I think that Ajit Pai did that I don't know if Jessica Rosenworcel did anything that was as good as those things.
Travis, what we've learned is you are getting him to love Ajit Pai just as much as you do at this point. Yeah. He is coming over.
Chris just touted a transparent failure. It's a good thing. That's
well, so that's so much one of the things, like, it drives me crazy. And this is a little bit of like criticism of Travis, which I feel like people who don't pay close attention are like, oh, well, like nothing really went wrong. Nothing went wrong. We should have more than 1 million additional connections of fiber in rural America right now, possibly 2 million, if we had done the RDOF auction correctly. It is now 5 years after that auction, and the money, and like, what is it, half of it? I'm sure that if Rye doesn't know it off the top of his head, you can throw it up here or look it up quick on the dashboard that our colleague Christine has maintained on RDOF. But like, it's almost all default. It's half of it's defaulted or something like that. And the parts that went out didn't even all go to good places. And just, it's so bad. Like, we had billions of dollars to build rural connections, and it failed so spectacularly that the federal government had to come up with a whole new way of distributing money, which is also not working so well. But it's because of the total failure of Ajit Pai. And one of the reasons we're now struggling to get more money out is because of how Ajit Pai refused to try and figure out where broadband actually was. He had no interest in it. So, like, it's like all these things that if you don't know what you're talking about, you're like, oh, well, like nothing really went wrong. Well, no, like, we missed years of progress.
I think we have Chris's answer.
All right. Rye tells me it's only 33%, so it's only a few $1 billion. It's not $4 billion. It's more like
there's another 20 or 30%. There's a whole lot more that hasn't been built and could default yet. So yes.
So hang on a second, Mr. Mitchell. It's kind of ironic. So in BEAD, you're like, well, if we lose a bunch of it and we still get people hooked up, it should be okay. It kind of sounds like that's what RDOF is then. We got some people hooked up, but we didn't get any.
This is a good argument. I don't think it's correct.
I'm parroting what you said. I don't know.
No, I mean,
I'm surprised. I mean,
I think there's a difference between. I think there's a difference between an approach in which you are trying to set these rules to get this money out to these rural areas versus when the Congress says, well, because we can't trust the FCC, we have to try this whole new process and to figure that out. This was not the first auction. I mean, there haven't been a ton of them, but there have been other auctions for the FCC to learn from. And the way that they went about it specifically, the biggest problem was that Ajit Pai and perhaps others on the commission said, we don't want to do any vetting up front. We're just going to take any bids from any random person, and then later on we'll figure out if that's correct or not. And it screwed up the whole bidding process in an obvious way. I mean, like, who lets just anyone go and auction and make these bids? You know, it changes the bidding strategies of everyone. And rather than the co-ops that should have got the money and the rural companies that have a history of deploying fiber in a cost-effective manner, they're suddenly bidding against a bunch of wireless companies, most of whom have defaulted, some of whom are still doing a good job, but like they ended up losing tons of areas where they would have already finished the fiber network right now because of the lack of seriousness that Ajit Pai brought to the rules. So
I don't think he likes Ajit Pai.
You know who says that the FCC should have focused more on fiber than wireless? Ajit Pai. Now that he's out and trying to make money, he's like, yeah, like, you know, he's focused on what gives the best returns for the private equity games that he plays, and he recognizes that we should have fiber. So he's his own worst critic in some ways. Probably not. All right, that probably went on for too long, but I want to talk about spectrum a little bit differently. I want to see, particularly, I want to throw this at Doug first, but I haven't read deeply in this, and I think we should see if Mike Dano will come back or someone else that covers this stuff deeply. I was surprised to see that apparently a lot of the spectrum that we were told 5 years ago would bring a 5G miracle to all of us, that spectrum is declining in value. So what is happening, Doug?
Well, this is not the first time now. So you know, spectrum gets put up for sale by the FCC, and the 2 or 3 or 4 big companies usually bid on most of it. And for some reason, this was millimeter wave spectrum, and they bid against each other like crazy. And Verizon ended up winning the biggest chunk of it, but they overpaid for it tremendously. And even at the time, people who understood the spectrum go, "What are they bidding so much money for? This stuff is real millimeter, very tiny waves, which means it doesn't penetrate it. It will not penetrate your skin." So if you have your cell phone,
will be happy to hear that.
If you have your cell phone behind your back, it would not connect to your cell phone. So it's not a very good spectrum for the kind of things for 5G, and it only goes very short distances, maybe 1,000 feet at the top. So what do you do? Put a cell site every 2,000 feet? And remember, that's what they started to do. Remember those trials where they were doing gigabit stuff in downtown Minneapolis and Denver and places? They put a cell site like at every corner to make that work.
Yes.
It was never going to work. And so they never found a use for it. And so it's just gone down. Now, this happened in the past. 12, 13, 15 years ago, we had a big auction for MMDS spectrum, another one for LMDS spectrum. Both eventually fell flat on their face, because the problem is the FCC doesn't just go, "You won the spectrum, do whatever you want." It's also very rigidly defined on how you can use it. And so if they find another use for it, they're not allowed to do that. They have to use it only for the way that it's been described to be used. And so in all 3 of these cases, the uses that the FCC defined is not what the market wants for it. So it turns out that the stuff that's being devalued, it's really wonderful to do a point-to-point microwave to get to an apartment building from one next door. But it's not worth the billions that Verizon paid to do that. I mean, it's just not worth that kind of money. It should be one of those they give away for free. So. Yeah.
And absent some kind of technological change, to me, it suggests that there is no expectation that mobile wireless will be competitive with fiber.
No, because this was the thing that was going to allow them to do gigabit mobile phones, and it's not going to happen because all the spectrum that can do that is not going to work. So that's, you know, this whole idea of the true, remember 6G, not the one they're talking about today, 6G, but the real 6G, they were talking about doing 5 gigabit wireless. There's a physics limitation is the problem. So yeah.
So on the fly, I'm going to share this quick. This is what I've been seeing lately. A little bit of this looming airwave gap at the same time, which to me seems interestingly timed with Senator Cruz being the head of the Commerce Committee, where he wants to find any last bit of spectrum he can and auction it off, rather than doing anything else, which is exactly what AT&T wants.
Now, first off, these companies never stop lobbying for spectrum, because even when the FCC says, let's go after this new block of spectrum, it takes a decade. So they have to always lobby because it takes that long for results. And so if you go look hard, every single trade event they go to, every time they meet the FCC, they say the same stuff, and they've done that for 30 years. So there's nothing new there. It's just because of the current political environment that they happen to print that, but they say that nonstop, and they have my whole lifetime. So, so that's not new, you know. But and there's not a shortfall of spectrum, but there could be in 10 or 15 years, and that's what they're lobbying for. They're getting ready for them, is what they're doing. So.
Which is why we need to do more spectrum sharing, which is exactly what they're opposed to. Kim, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I knew that Doug was only 30 years old, if it's been happening for 30 years, his whole lifetime. So good to know that, Doug.
Well, this is where
I get younger every show. It's this show that keeps me on.
I mean, this is where, our mega listener, Ruben, is asking, about fiber-like wireless. And no, I mean, I think there are wireless products that are delivering super high capacity, high quality connections. However, there are limits to deploying that to every home in a given area. And it's certainly not going to happen on the mobile side from T-Mobile, or well, I should say from AT&T and Verizon. Who knows what T-Mobile will do in the future? They're wild.
Yeah, Verizon had talked about a nationwide gigabit network. I mean, that's what they meant when they bought that spectrum. It was never going to happen. So yeah,
I mean, they announced Sacramento in like 2017 or something that they were going to have this everywhere. And I saw an article a year or two ago from Sacramento that was like, "Hey, Verizon, is that going to happen?" Because Verizon. So what happened was that these companies asked for expedited and zero cost access to the public rights of way. So if we step back for a second, this could turn into a rant, but I'm going to try very hard for it not to, and we'll see what you guys make me do. But we have the public right of way in order to simplify access to it for companies that need it to build pipelines, water systems, electric systems, and telecommunications systems. And it is a benefit in that everyone is supposed to win. It is public property, and the local government is supposed to negotiate some benefits to the public for that beyond just simply having access to pay for a service. And the wireless companies were pushing hard for Congress, and this is something Ajit Pai tried to do, which was to overrule local authority to require them to give away public land at no charge, and to have very rapid turnaround permitting and things like that, which is not to say I'm justifying the bad permitting process that exists in some places, but they pushed for all this, saying that they were going to put up all of this amazing wireless and bring competition finally to bring gigabit wireless everywhere. And they were totally wrong. I mean, like the amount of and it's one thing to be like, oh, they made an honest mistake. The number of stories that I hear that I can't just repeat on a public show like this from people who are like, here's how AT&T systematically defrauded us. It's like these companies know what they're doing.
They were going to build 2 million mini cell sites, small cell sites. They've only built a couple 100,000, and almost all of those are on top of high-rise buildings pointing down inside the elevator shaft. So they didn't actually hardly build very many public ones at all. So
yeah. So I don't want to. Travis, did you have a reaction to all this?
I'm a little bitter on it, to be honest with you. The 1680 gigahertz millimeter spectrums, they're fine when they work, but any heavy rain, snow, any attenuation, they're dead. And, it was a fine technology 10 years ago when people could go without the internet. But like I've always said, you miss 2 or 3 pings and people just lose their mind, and they one-star you to death. So we're in the process of retiring all of our millimeter wave links. It was fun, but it's certainly not a future.
That's from where you were on top of like the IDS tower.
We're on top of tall buildings pointing at each other. You get a snowstorm that comes in at a fort, where it comes in at an angle and it gets on the dishes, you're done. So not a fan. No. And I'm not surprised it's devalued.
Kim, any thoughts on the spectrum stuff?
No. I'm just gonna say no to you all day, Chris.
Okay, Kim, what do you think about uploading? It turns out people are uploading more and more and more and more and more and more, and it's really exciting.
Duh. That's my answer.
Really, Chris, is that the best you can do? Seriously.
Is this actually
Like-
somebody surprised about this or what?
There's a lot of people who are surprised. I can't tell you how many operators and WISPs in particular have told me, people don't need to upload. We need to give people download. No one wants to upload.
Oh,
And the cable companies is like, like they're like, oh, nobody uses the upload. Well, yeah, because you don't give them the ability to upload. As people get the ability to upload, what do you know? They upload more. What are we talking about? Open Vault released a new report in which it talks about how basically like the rate of increase for like people using download services is basically not changing or not in a positive direction. Whereas for like the fourth year in a row, people are rapidly increasing how much they upload. So as Kim said, duh, that's what I would have expected.
Yeah. Like what is that? I think this is just an argument that you see why people don't need fiber. I mean, this is their argument that's saying you don't need this strong upload speeds, right? Because people don't need the uploads because we can't deliver the upload. This is just another example of how the market is trying to drive consumer behavior instead of consumer behavior trying to drive the marketplace. And I think this is more of a marketing spin on it, to be honest.
well, it has to be because the technology they're using has that limitation. So of course you're going to say that. If your technology didn't have that limitation, you'd be like, oh, people upload like crazy. So I actually, one of the most astute things I've heard on this show, I'm going to go with Kim. Duh. Yeah.
Doug?
It was short, succinct, and to the point.
Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things I saw, I mean, if I was to argue against it, if I was one of those people, I would say, yeah, but if you dig into the report, you find out that a lot of that increase is a small number of people. And I think we're back to the bandwidth hog argument, to which my answer is, yeah, that's the future. Like what a few of us are doing now is what everyone else will be doing in 5 years, maybe 3 years.
No, and the point is, shouldn't you be able to be a photographer or make home videos and sell them on YouTube or whatever? That's where the stuff's coming from, and it's not that small of a percentage of people. An awful lot of people are taking and sending movies to each other. So
yeah, my life is so much better with terabytes of backup in the cloud. Like I love it, knowing that like I don't have to be perfect at preventing my computer from failing.
Well, the bigger your backup gets, the harder it is for you to find anything you ever did. Right? So.
As long as I never have to use it, it won't be a problem.
Right.
Travis, anything else on uploads? Have you tracked to see like how things have changed over with your system over time?
I was just looking at it. If you exclude streaming, which is heavy on the download, right? It looks like for every 3 megabit of download, there's 1 megabit of upload. So give me some fancy college-educated definition, Mr. Mitchell. 3 to 1 is what I'm seeing as we sit here right now.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. But again, exclude streaming. If you include streaming, then it skews it all.
Sure.
With the download.
Right. And it's one of those things, like a lot of people don't fully understand this, but going from 100 megabit to a gigabit is not going to change your streaming performance. If you, sorry, I was looking, Travis, Rye was encouraging you at some point to share some of your stuff so people could see what systems you use. I just, we did a tour of Red Spectrum in Coeur d'Alene, run by the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and saw how they run everything through a system called Sonar, which I think a lot of smaller companies use. And it was really cool seeing how they can navigate around and do quick reports and things like that.
Yep. Duh. I like
okay. All right. So both New York and the California Public Utility Commission have announced new awards. The New York awards, I was pretty excited by. It's a lot of rural county type stuff, often partnerships, but then also the city of Jamestown moving forward with an Ammon, Idaho fiber type model with open access from the folks at Entry Point. They've got a couple of other cities moving along. They're getting into some bigger cities that are using that product for the open access approach, and I'm excited to see that. And then we see a bunch of awards in the Los Angeles County area and around there with cities that are targeting areas that have certainly low adoption, but also where it's not clear that the cable company actually serves everyone. But it's also areas where the cable companies clearly serves a lot of people. And so we have public dollars that will be used to build new networks to connect people in areas where a big national cable company already has some connections, but is really not getting the job done. And this sets us up for the next fight about overbuilding. So that's coming next. We're already starting to hear about it. This is going to be a big focus of Congress. And I see Doug ready to say something about it.
Well, let's look at a couple of the awards. One of the awards in LA was Crenshaw.
Right, which is not settled yet. So Crenshaw still needs to raise a little bit additional money before it gets fully done. But this is it's an amazing. I'm excited about that award. Go ahead.
But assuming that they find that money, this is an area that's supposedly served by Comcast. But you don't even have to charter. You don't even have to leave your desk to find out it's not true. Go on to Street View and you can see streets in Crenshaw where the wires are on one side of the street and nobody on the other side of the street is connected. So it's very spotty, very odd coverage by Charter. And everyone there says it's very underserved. And in fact, a lot of people say they're unserved. So, it's filling in a gap. Now, the award's not going to the city. This is not a municipal award. It's a nonprofit. So it's not even a public-private partnership because it's a nonprofit and an ISP. But so, New York is more interesting as they're giving the money directly to municipalities to build open access networks. And the reason they're able to do that is they took the money on day one and set it aside just for those grants. No one else can apply for that money.
But this is capital project fund dollars.
Yes, capital project fund. They set that up as municipal open access networks are the only folks to apply. So of course they got takers. It took years because the folks had to go build their business plan and find their partner. But was there 7 or 8 awards? I mean, that's a whole lot of new open access. Too bad Kim would get more excited if she still was at the job that did that. So
I'm still at the job for 4 more hours, Doug. I'm very excited.
That's 4 more hours of excitement. 4 more hours of excitement. Yes.
I think it's going to be interesting because I think that it's going to be interesting to see, can all these open access networks really survive? But I mean, I think it's a benefit to what people really want, competition. But I do think on these awards, I think it's going to be a fight more than anybody believes, that people are going to challenge some of these awards. Like, I think with the new administration and overbuilding, it's going to be a different story. So I think it will be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious how Travis reacts to this. If you either want to react from sort of like your ISP hat, but also as a citizen who pays taxes. I mean, our criminal justice system supposedly operates in a way in which we'd rather see one. We'd rather see one in it. What is the phrase? We'd rather see 100 guilty people go free than one innocent person be convicted. Right? We make it hard, in theory, through jury trials, et cetera, to convict the wrong person. And so the question is, if you can't be perfect on something, in which way do you err? And the way the CAR and others on the Republican side think, they would rather have federal dollars not go to 100 households if there's a chance that one of those households could have a second option, because that would be a waste. And so they want to spend tens of millions of dollars to distribute $1 billion. They want to spend a significant fraction of it just making sure that it couldn't possibly go to someone that already has an option. And I've come out strongly opposed to that because I just think that's stupid. But I'm curious how you react to it, even though I'm obviously putting my thumb on the scale for one way. I'm not going to hide that.
I'm not sure I have an opinion, Chris.
At least it's not duh.
Yeah. So I guess ultimately the question that you're asking is it better to hook up some people than hook up none, right? Is that kind of fun?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. A different way to think of it is this: like, people never people forget about the cost of bureaucrats, which is to say, there's this big thing up here in Minnesota about making school lunches free for everyone versus having it only available to those who are underprivileged and cannot afford it. And it turns out, this is my understanding, and I keep always wanting to double check it or triple check it. My understanding is it literally costs less to give everybody free lunches than it does to give a smaller number of people free lunches, but to pay a bunch of adults every day to be verifying and running the system to figure out who gets the free lunches. And so like, there's times where you're just like, screw it. Like, let's just not try to like have this complicated system that requires a ton of people to do all this checking and filling out forms and all this other stuff. Let's just do it. And we're going to have some people that get something that they might not be entitled to, but we're all better off if we just do it that way.
Now, most of the people in the New York grants are not served, but there are a couple of them are clearly served, and the other ones probably have some overlap here and there. So yes, they will certainly fail the 1 out of 100 test. So.
Aren't we going through that right now with BEAD, where we've spent 3 or 4 years dinking around trying to get this map going to try to make sure we accurately represent?
Yes,
this is exactly my point. Yeah, so the rescue plan dollars got out largely, and the capital project fund dollars got out because they said, we're going to give it to localities, and localities, we want you to generally give it out to areas where there's no service or where people aren't well connected, where they can't afford it, or where there's not good reliability. We don't actually have a way of measuring reliability. And so cities and states were like, okay, we're going to give it out to this area because we think it's not reliable enough. And they just went ahead, they got the money out, they built the networks. And with BEAD, they said, we're going to quantify everything, and we're going to try to make sure that we don't accidentally give it to one wrong household. And here we are. This is what happens. Like,
what is that old thing? Analysis paralysis or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's BEAD. That's the definition.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So you know what? Oh, I hate to admit this in public, but I kind of agree with Chris. And
we need a celebration. We have like the whole like the show's like temporarily suspended. We need like a big like celebration, like fireworks or something.
You know what? I would rather see us do something that some people can benefit than effectively what we've done now, which is nothing. I mean, Kim is going to hook up more people to the internet in her last 4 hours than BEAD has done in the last 4 years. That's a shame. That is a shame. And that's, I guess, so I agree with Chris that if you're going to worry about losing a percentage of it, you'll never do anything.
Yeah.
So, and I think
so, but this is what we'll be arguing.
Well, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing. And your point on the school lunch is true. The bureaucracies these people put in place, it's just we have, not that it's the same, but we figured out to administer our ACP program was costing us more money in certain buildings. We just pre-qualify the whole building.
Yeah, that's the right thing to do. Like
it's easier for the customers, easier for the users. It's easier for us. Everybody wins. And I think that's a really small version of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I mean, like, do you want your job really to be like trying to track down, like double checking the income of a family to make sure that their kid is appropriately getting the right lunch? Like, no, like that's not a good job to create. Like we could be more productive.
And same thing, that for us,
deep in thought.
That particular building.
I am deep in. Yeah. I'm just like wondering who Chris Mitchell has become. Like, listen to this, right? Criticizing school lunches and everything like that. But I think this goes down to a business concept. In business, you have to take risks to get rewards. And I think that sometimes the government's trying to dot all their I's and cross all their T's, and you can't just do that. Sometimes you have to take risks to make it to the next level. And I kind of agree with Chris and Travis. What's happening here today? I don't know.
This is not a good show. This is really not a good show, guys.
I think we're have to shut it down now. I'm going to agree with them too. So there's no reason.
Okay. The other
Bri, just disconnect. We're done.
Yeah. Delete this episode.
I want to talk about BEAD or not BEAD. I want to talk about Dish and DirecTV. I don't track a lot of the satellite stuff as well, but I've always been interested in the Dish network, in part because I'm on it. I'm a longtime Ting Mobile customer, and Ting Mobile got sold to Dish. When T-Mobile bought Sprint, the the courts in their ever-loving wisdom approved this merger because they said that there was not going to be a change of competition from 4 providers to 3, that there was going to be a 4th provider called Dish that was going to be coming in and providing more competition to them. And Nilay Patel, I've mentioned this several times. If you listen to the Verge cast, I would just like a collection of his rants about Dish, because the FCC keeps agreeing with Dish that they have made these investments. And Nilay Patel is like, then why can't anyone find them anywhere? Like, it's impossible to find. And one of the things that there was a hope was that Dish and DirecTV were going to merge, and that was going to give some additional capacity to Dish to build out and to be a real 4th competitor. That merger has failed. The bondholders rejected it, and so it seems like we're stuck with three wireless providers. There's not going to be any meaningful competition. Doug?
Well, Charlie Ergen still now has 2 or 3 months to find all this money, because he has a big balloon payment coming, and if he doesn't, then they're done. They're finished. So they will fold. It's so hard, and this, how many ads have you seen in your lifetime for T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T? I mean, a new guy to break into that market on a nationwide scale is really going to be hard. And so it was never very hopeful. But very quietly, you know what's happened? Comcast and Charter have a lot of customers.
Right, for their wireless program.
They've done very well. And so and they're doing it very quietly. They only advertise to their own customers. You don't see their ads very often otherwise.
When you say very well, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, they're adding, millions of customers every quarter. I mean, they're really growing to us. I think they're up to 5 or 6% of the market. So to start with nothing is pretty amazing. So, so it can be done, but not. Dish is never going to be a 4th equal player. It'll never, ever happen in 20 years. So now I'd love to hear that podcast too, because the FCC has a cellular map that's just like the broadband map, and it's actually probably worse. In my county alone, there's large parts of the rural area here where the only company shown as covering it is Dish. And so those folks are not going to be eligible if they ever do this 5G fund, because they're going to say, no, you're served. It's like, but there's not a Dish store within 1,000 miles of here. How can I be served? Right. So, yeah, it's a really bizarre thing that they've done.
Kim, do you have a comment on that, or would you like to answer Ruben's?
I just wanted to show Ruthie. Yes, this is Ruthie. She's 4.8 pounds with 1 tooth. She is my cat. Bless her heart.
Wow.
She
and without that tooth, she would be 4.7 pounds. Yeah.
She's big. But yeah, no, I don't have anything on that. I think that, Doug, you said everything on the Dish thing. Like, what else is there to say? But I think you made a record, though, Chris, of how many times you could say Dish in one sentence. You said it a lot. But, like, what is there to say on this one? Like, Chris, you're making a lot of sense on this show, so I don't know if we're used to this today. We might need to regroup.
I had the right amount of not sleeping last night, apparently. It's a rare occurrence.
Yeah, can it and bring it back later. Yeah.
The last thing on the article is one, and maybe we can just talk about this a little bit and come back to it. But it's not outside the realm of the possible that one of us, if we had a chance to be in a room with the president, 47th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, that he would suddenly announce that we were in charge of fixing ACP or internet access. And so
I could be an FCC commissioner finally?
No, not an FCC commissioner. We're talking about someone who can actually do something.
Okay.
I think Travis could be a good, yeah.
But the question is,
I don't know if I could do it.
The question is, if you were just given the task of being the ACP czar to figure out how to get an affordability, program going, to try to, let's just broaden it to try to make sure people who have very limited income would be able to afford access, what would you do?
Me personally, what would I do? Or what?
Yeah. No, what would you do, Travis?
You know what? I thought the last iteration was okay for a government program. It was probably one of the best I'd ever seen. So
your solution is to write big checks to wireless companies and Charter who do no additional investment.
Well,
Oh.
well, do you know they don't do it? That's your impression of that.
I'm
all about.
hypothesizing.
Here's the thing: I'm all about hooking up people to networks that actually exist, not to networks that are mythical.
Yeah, good answer.
Yeah, and so I would happily allocate funds to networks that are actually can solve the problem today. And if a new network comes along and is a better network and they want to participate, more power to them. But we can't pretend to invest in things that will never come up, will never arrive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my theory.
Kim?
I don't know. It's like no matter what you do on this subject, I think it's going to be hard, right? I agree with Travis that having like live networks that can provide this is a good thing, but I think that you're going to get criticized any which way you go. I do think that ACP was a little too generous on some fronts of where they gave money to some of the wireless carriers and whatnot for connectivity. And I think that there needs to be a few more barriers with that. But I did think that ACP was pretty effective. I think some of their marketing plays at the beginning were terrible of how to get the message out. But go for it, Travis. Go.
I would say, though, it would be really nice if they differentiated the cell service from your broadband service.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because Kim, you didn't mean like the fixed wireless companies. You meant the mobile wireless, right?
I meant the mobile wireless, not the fixed wireless. I think that was one of the downfalls of ACP was the mobile wireless, because I think that gave out a lot more money. And like I think they should be home connections. So but I did like a lot of ACP. And I did think that they should at least, in my personal opinion, I don't think you have USF and ACP at the same time. I think one of those has to stay or go.
We might have neither one soon.
You might. I mean, that's the direction it's going. But yeah, no, I agree. I think you just have to put a little more barriers on it, but I think it was a great program.
Doug?
I think that what happened after ACP ended is very interesting. At least some of the big cable companies that all came out with really reasonably priced low-income packages for $15 to $30 that are not bad. And so, for $30, you can buy 100 megabits from these big companies. And in some cases, if you can prove your need, you can get it for $15. And that's without a government subsidy. So the fact is, there are alternatives. And there's probably ways that we can entice those kind of ISPs to do that sort of stuff without having this giant program. So,
yeah, for me, the thing that I come back to is it's something that it would be hard to figure out how to do on a national basis. But I find it hard to watch. I use Cleveland as an example with Joshua Edmonds there and Digital C. It's hard to watch. I forget exactly what the numbers are, but tens of millions of dollars coming in there to go to Charter and the wireless companies, when if that money was spent on Digital C being able to expand their network, then you would not just have a low income solution, it would also be creating additional competition and choices that would benefit all populations, which is the sort of thing that you would want to end up with, I think. And so, if I had to do that, I feel like I'd want to have a couple of different programs for dealing with different realities, where you had the right kind of provider locally that you could work with versus where you were just stuck with one of the big cable or telephone companies. Travis?
Yeah, I mean, if to Doug's point, if the state or the municipality could entice operators, for instance, waive sales tax on fiber infrastructure. Give access, if possible, to the state fiber network. In return, they produce their own ACP program. I mean, there could be things that could really benefit operators that doesn't really cost the government anything if they offer this program and without subsidizing it. I mean, just the sales tax savings alone could fund most ISPs' ACP program pretty effectively.
The challenge there is the way taxes impact different levels of government. And so it's not to say that you're wrong, Travis, but to some extent, the federal government waiving sales tax at the local level results in some challenges, I think.
Well, the irony is
the local guys would have to waive it. The feds should never override.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They'd have to find some way for the federal government to try to interfere with the local level where that sales tax is set.
Yeah, well, there is, but they had that for years and years and years for voice service. If you provide voice service in like the state of Minnesota, you didn't pay tax on your infrastructure. But then when it came to broadband, that didn't qualify.
Yeah, I have to look in to figure out exactly what those taxes were, because that may have been a state program dealing with certain taxes.
Well, I think what it was is because broadband is not taxed as a service, then there's no tax benefits to deploy it. If there's a long-term benefit to the state, they'll let you put the infrastructure in for free with our tax free.
Right. I'm just saying that the challenge here is there's a reason that there are tax accountants. Because
yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, if, a way to get an ACP or the idea of that infrastructure bank, that's a great idea. If there's an infrastructure bank where operators could borrow money inexpensively, and in return they provide an ACP program for eligible people. Win-win for the operator, win-win for the customer.
Right. And then the other thing that you've advanced before, Travis, that I'm always a fan of would be if there was going to be grants, you're starting off small. So if USI Fiber had access to do, like a small part of a neighborhood, prove that it worked, and then have access to grants that would allow you to do an entire neighborhood, prove that it worked.
Yeah.
Access to get more additional grants to do, something else. Like that's something that iteration is not something that the government typically does like that, but it would be interesting if it could. Doug?
No, I love Travis's idea. I've been in favor of infrastructure banks for 20 years because, if someone gave Travis a 2% loan and said you have to give $30 internet to 10% of your customers, he would take that in a second. So
absolutely.
So so that there's some real easy carrots there that could be handled. So.
Yeah, I did reach out to try to find someone that about a month ago or so that could talk about infrastructure banks with us, and I came up short, but I'm looking.
Yeah, that's good. So. Well, that's because nobody likes us, but
maybe if I told them that I wouldn't be there for that show, they'd want to come on and hang out with you all.
I thought we had a list of guests. I thought we had a waiting list of guests. It wasn't an infrastructure bank.
Yeah, why don't you send Rye out to find somebody? I don't know.
They'll be like, "Oh, this email seems less obnoxious than the last one I got." All right. Well, it's been a fun episode. I think let's just look ahead. Next week, we're certainly not going to be back, but I think the week after that we probably will be. So hopefully 2 weeks from today, I will circulate sometimes. I think Friday works for us. If you're a person who's not watching this because it's on a Friday, then raise your hand. Nope. Kim will have. When do you start the new job, Kim? Are you going to take some time?
I have 2 weeks off. I don't know what I'm going to do for 2 weeks. My house will be so organized soon. And
Kim, just please, can you come back in 2 weeks in like a magnificent state of dishevelment? Like just your hair wild, wearing weird clothes, background just trash all over the place?
I'm wearing a fur jacket. You think that I can get weirder than this? I mean, a fake fur.
Yes, I do.
Say she's losing her job in 3 hours, and they already turned her heat off. This is not good.
just look what 2 weeks from now is going to look like. I can't wait. Stay tuned.
I'm excited. But I hope people have a good time, an ability to spend next week with family, and it goes well. Not always the easiest task, but it's a good week usually to hopefully get a little bit of relaxation in. And I'll be trying to catch up on a bunch of stuff, trying to book some new guests for the future from our line of people that don't know they're in that line, and we'll look forward to it. We'll be doing a retrospective show in less than a month. So we'll have to start thinking about the lessons we've learned over the course of the year and stuff like that. But for that, I guess, I'm really starting to fade now. I'm going to take a nap soon. But it's been another fun episode of Connect This.